one of the main points that lots of people made was you won't be improving or remodeling the units. You just want more money and are self-admittedly lazy, which some people actually do kind of make that suggestion here. So let's move on to the next topic. You are threatening, coercing, extorting, and taking advantage of your tenants. Kratos 5 says, well, what do you think is fair? For you to F off and let your greedy, lazy, scalping butt expire in the woods somewhere. That way, at least scavengers could eat you and you would actually serve some sort of meaningful purpose. A well thought out comment indeed. Any response to that one, Dion?
Well, props to the creativity of that comment. I like it. I went into a few of them and asked if they actually had something constructive to say, or were they just a keyboard coward? And then that spirals them into a bunch of statements, which is fun to watch. If a tenant were to say, what's fair is for me to stay where I'm at, then I probably wouldn't have purchased that property. That would mean that they were close to or at area average rents. Mm-hmm. I have had no tenants do that. So if it ever happens, then we'll come back and make a video about it, because so far, nobody has been that unintelligent to think that it makes sense for somebody to be hundreds of dollars below the area average rents just because their previous owner purchased a house 10 or 15 years ago when properties were a third the price, or the property was paid off. And that when somebody else buys a property, they should continue to get this good deal that they've been getting because their previous owner didn't know what they were doing.
But Dion, it's their home. Dion, it's their home. How can you, what gives you the right to go in and kick someone out of their home? It's where they live.
Well, I haven't kicked anyone out yet.
It's a good point.
I would say what gives me the right to kick them out would be if they broke part of the lease agreement, didn't pay their rent. It hasn't happened yet. So what gives me the right to kick someone out of their home is the same laws that dictate all of us. I've rented, I own. If I stop paying my property taxes, someone's going to kick me out of my property. Mm-hmm. Same thing.
So what I think is interesting is very, very, out of the hundreds, if maybe not even thousands of comments that I read through, the majority of people failed to recognize that you don't have to do the binder strategy at all. Their lease will expire probably within at least 1 year, or it could already be on month to month, in which case you're just going to give your 90 days and say, okay, we're not going to renew your lease. You're not going to have an option to stay here. I would never want to put that burden of raising rents on you. So instead, I'll make sure that you have to go find somewhere else to live where you're going to double your rent instead of increase it by 30%. And people just didn't want to give that thought or that idea any merit. Dion, what do you think the reason behind that is?
Well, most tenants live in fear of a property being sold and then being told they have to move because there is a cost of moving. It's disruptive. You might not be able to find something in the same school district or close enough to work to where you have a shorter or the same amount of commute. I mean, there's a lot of things that are disruptive that way. Mm-hmm. So what I like about the strategy that I use is it gives the tenant part of the conversation. How many tenants have been included in the decision-making process of setting their own rents? Right. And then I get with the Reddit community, with not all Reddit, with this group in Reddit, that if a landlord were to buy a property and then do the binder strategy and ignore the previously existing lease, mm-hmm. it would be breaking the law.
Right.
At least in Washington state, maybe there are states that are different, but in Washington state, where both of us live, I know you invest out of state, but the lease is between tenant and property, not tenant and landlord. So when I acquire a property, that lease that's in existence, I'm held to it. So if they're on month to month, I still wait 2 months to have this conversation. It does a few things. And this is where the, coercion happens. I put in coded locks because tenants in my properties usually have keys and they like not having keys. I put in motion sensor LED exterior lights so they feel more secure. I ask the tenants if there's anything that they would like to have fixed because that might not have been pointed out in the inspection, giving them a chance to point out things that they want. 2 months later, they know I'm actually going to take care of the place because I asked what they wanted fixed and I took care of those things. Mm-hmm. That conversation goes a lot better because they know I'm going to take care of the place. And then in Washington, in order to do a rent increase over 10%, you have to give 60 days notice. So I set the rent change for 90 days in the future, giving them 3 months to mentally adjust for this change, whether they're on an existing lease that expired or a month-to-month lease. They still get that much time. Mm-hmm. I would say they have a point. If I had high tenant turnover, but I have 16 rental units, and in 10 years, I have only had those 2 tenant turnovers, and neither one of them was because of a rent change.
Mm-hmm. So it kind of sounds like they're all up in arms about it, but in actual practicality, when you actually carry out this strategy, everybody's walking away pretty happy. Now, you kind of jumped into a couple of other topics, jumped the gun, got a little bit ahead here. So one of the main points that lots of people made was you won't be improving or remodeling the units. You just want more money and are self-admittedly lazy. L. Jefferox comments, I see no mention of him telling people he's going to fix or upgrade the property, yet he still wants to raise their rent. But it sounds like you just explained the first thing you do is you come in and you put in the motion sensor lights, you put in the locks, you make sure that if they have any questions about or concerns about the property, it immediately gets addressed. You fix those issues. And then a few months later, you would come to them with the binder strategy. And then the key takeaway here with the binder strategy is if they got 6 months left in their lease, you're not going and saying, today we're raising the rents. It's when the lease expires 6 months from now, 8 months from now, at that point, I will lock you in at a still preferable rate compared to all the houses around us in the area. And we'll lock you in at that rate if you think that's fair. And they come back and always say they volunteer to raise it themselves because they recognize how fair it is for them.